Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus A330 pilot, and welcome to one of my favorite airlines and A330 operators. Former operators to be exact. Of course we are talking about Airberlin. Airberlin's been operating the A330-200 and 300, mostly the 200s on the long hauls. And today we are going to do just that. We'll fly from Düsseldorf over to Puerto Plata, which is going to be about a 10-hour ride. But before we start, first of all, thank you so much to creator D97K, who created this wonderful Airberlin fleet pack, including 5 of the aircraft in the Airberlin livery. Now let's go ahead and have a look at our flight plan to decide on the amount of fuel we are going to carry. And this is what our route is going to look like from Düsseldorf to Puerto Plata. Initially we depart to the north and then across, well, just about Manchester, across Ireland out to the Atlantic Ocean, Newfoundland, and then south of Nova Scotia towards the Bermudas, and from there on towards the Dominican Republic. If we have a look into the significant weather charts, we can see that the first 2 hours are going to be smooth, but thereafter we are going to cross a couple of jet streams and we'll fly across the North Atlantic track system. So over here you can see that area is marked number 1 and that got turbulence to flight level 400. Then the same later on going through area number 2 with turbulence up to flight level 380, both of which we'll probably have to fly through. Now, going a little bit further down then, once we've passed the initial couple of jet streams, we will have another few hours of a smooth ride, until we are just about to be in Nova Scotia and cross another clear air turbulence area over here with turbulence up to flight level 390, which once again we'll probably not be able to circumnavigate. Last but not least, once we've passed this jet stream here for the past 2 hours or so, we will have a mostly smooth ride down towards Puerto Plata. Looking into the airport weather, we do have only one SIGMET, and that's severe mountain waves forecast up to flight level 230, so that's not going to affect us. So going further down to the airports themselves, we do have good weather conditions in Düsseldorf for the time being, and our destination Puerto Plata has awesome weather forecast as well. Some light rain, but most importantly easterly winds, which means we are going to fly the RP approach across the mountains, which is a really beautiful approach over in Puerto Plata. Our alternate Punta Cana has good weather in the forecast as well, so we don't need to take much extra fuel for the weather conditions. However, since we are crossing a North Atlantic track, I am going to take a little bit extra just in case we get some rerouting or have to fly a little bit lower, you name it. So we have a planned takeoff fuel of 65.1, round about 400 taxi, making it 65.5 for our minimum fuel. Now I want to take 1,500 extra just in case we get some rerouting or fly a little bit lower, you name it. So 67 tons of fuel should be sufficient for our flight today. With that out of the way, follow me inside as we are going to take a seat in the captain's seat of our A330-200. Now this aircraft in the real world was equipped with the Pratt & Whitney engines. In the simulator we do have the General Electric engines, which get closest to the real ones. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get ready for our flight. So the engine master levers are off, the start selector is in norm, the weather radar is now set and off. Landing gear lever is down and the wiper selectors are both off. Then let's check our battery voltage. We need 25.5 minimum, and this is all looking good. So let's go ahead and power the aircraft up. So while the aircraft is coming
runway
live,
awareness, okay.
Let's go ahead and set our
Meters.
radios. We're going to use 1 to 2.8 in VHF 1 and then 1 to 1.5 in VHF number 2. Come on, you can do this. Here we go. Alright, and we want to be sure to actually listen to both of them and also get the interphone up and finally turn on the speakers as well. Perfect. Then our aircraft has started, the flight warning computer has booted, so let's go ahead and press the APU fire test, which is working just fine. And then let's start up our APU so that we can get some air conditioning going. Temperatures outside aren't really all that comfy, around about 0 degrees. So, RS mode selectors, 1, 2, 3 going into nav. The cockpit lights are set. Then we can do our EFB initialization. And you can see I've already downloaded the flight plan. So it's Airberlin 7382 from Düsseldorf to Puerto Plata. And then I have also already pre-fueled the aircraft to 67 tons. Our flight plan is available up here, and then we can do our takeoff calculations, and for that we start with runway 23 left. We'll take intersection Lima 1, which is 2,645 meters. Like that. Synchronize the weather, and our takeoff weight initially is going to be around about 221 tons. So let's do some calculations and see what we're going to get. So this one says we need toga 138-140-146, which is interesting. I did some calculations for basically the very same conditions earlier on with the real-world Airbus FlySmart tool, and Airbus actually gives us a flex temperature of 40 degrees. We will use the Airbus values today, and not the ones from the IndyBuilds EFB, just so that we can see what's going on there and if the IndyBuilds can match the flight performance of the real aircraft. This is going to be interesting. Okay then. Last but not least, we also got to prepare our charts in our electronic flight bag. And since Airberlin did use Lido, I will use Lido over here as well. And our departures are going to be from runway 23 left, and we're going towards the northwest. So I guess it's going to be that chart up here, but let's go ahead and have a look. And indeed, that's the SONAP departure, so that's the one. Perfect. So with that, our charts are prepared, our aircraft is prepared. Then let's check its technical status to see what we're up to today. So recall for 3 seconds, like that, and there's nothing in there. Logbook, MEL items, the aircraft is all good. Configuration summary, A330-200 with GE engines. And, well, that's it. Now the OEBs today are going to be a little bit more interesting. So we have 2 OEBs on this aircraft. That's OEB number 30 issue 2, which is incorrect vertical profile during non-precision approaches. And that one is going to affect us today. But we are going to have a look at that in more detail when we start the approach preparation later on. The other one is OEB 57 issue 1, which is cabin pressure excess cabin altitude, and that one basically says if the cabin pressure excess cabin altitude warning shows, we will apply the ECAM procedure even if not confirmed on the cabin pressure SD page. The background for that is that some of the cabin pressurization computers are faulty on some A330s, and therefore if a single one of the 2 triggers, that's sufficient to start the rapid decompression procedures basically. Alright, so with that our aircraft is accepted for service. Then let's make sure that it's also safe for service and has been serviced properly by the engineering, and we have enough oxygen, we have enough hydraulic quantities, and then we can check the engine oil. So let's turn the FADEC on, and engine oil is sufficient for the flight, even though it could be a little bit more, up to 22.5 in the real world. But in any case, that's that. So the flaps are up and agree with the lever, the ground spoilers are retracted. Then let's check the park and brake, and the alternate brake system, that's looking good. And park and brake is set again. Then, last but not least, the APU is on, so APU bleed on. Let's also turn the lights on so that our colleague can start the walk around. And with that, we are done with our initial cockpit preparation. So let's continue with the rest of the cockpit preparation procedure. Now this is the kind of stuff that you've already heard me explain a lot of times, so I'm not going to explain all of this in detail, but I'll just run the procedures. If you're interested in detailed explanations, I recommend checking out my tutorial series for the aircraft. Okay, so we had a QNH of 1037, pretty high today. Here we go. We are certainly going to use the timing in GPS. and it's the 16th of January 2025. Okay, everything's set up down here. The transponder is also set. Then let's go into our FMS preparation. And for that, first of all, we will take our SimBrief dispatch app onto the viewer over here. And here we go. So, it's an A330-200 CF6 engines, and the nav database is current at the time of this recording. Let's delete any of the previous waypoints and check any of those messages. And then, initialize flight plan requests. You can in the meantime scroll down a little bit to the OFP down here. Now let's have a look. Düsseldorf to Puerto Plata, alternate Punta Cana, Airberlin 7382, cost index 10, and cruise level 360 initially. Alright, so that far it's looking good. Then let's go onto the flight plan. We are departing towards SONAP of runway 23 left. And then we have the SONAP 8 Tango departure down here. Insert that one, and for our arrival we'll pick the RNAV Zulu approach, runway 08, coming in via the Pogag 3 Sierra arrival, and via Baypart. Alright, insert that, then let's go ahead and program the engine out, and that one is going to be fairly easy. Straight ahead to Düsseldorf X3, which is based on the runway Düsseldorf 23 left / 232 and 25 miles straight ahead. Alright, store that one. Then let's go back to the secondary, copy active. Then we have the Düsseldorf X3, and we can insert a holding over there as well. Finally, if we need to make an immediate return, I will program one for Düsseldorf onto an ILS approach runway 23 left and insert that. Now let's also draw that on the nav display, so we'll take the departure runway down here and insert the radial on the runway heading, giving us the extended center line, and then we'll also insert the engine out waypoint Düsseldorf X3 onto here. Alright, so that's the basics entered. We could tune some of the radios, but to be honest we don't really need them as the departure is all on off, so let's miss out on that. Then let's go on to the init page. We have a zero fuel weight of 151.8, which equals basically 290 passengers and 3 tons of cargo. In the absence of a CG, we'll just enter 25 for the time being, 67 tons of fuel, 500 kilos of taxi fuel. Then we have a reserve of 1.8. The alternate fuel is 3.6, and the final reserve fuel 2.1. So the average wind component today is a headwind of 38 knots. Here we go, and then we can already go on to the performance page. Now I'm taking the real world numbers over here, so flaps 2, flex 40, and the speeds 144, 144, and 151. Noise abatement procedure number 2, engine out 1500. And last but not least, we are going to do a D-rate 1 for our climb. And that's the FMS setup now completed. Now we could go ahead and enter all those step climbs, but to be completely honest, I sometimes have the feeling that that stuff doesn't work correctly all the way anyway, but let's give it a try. So the first step climb is going to be at Lompi, flight level 380. So Lompi 380 and then flight level 400 at Markor. So Markor 400. Then wind request. Now let's have a look at the predictions. Extra... Okay, let's give it a while. Why did it delete my route reserves again? That was 1.8 if I'm not mistaken. A little bit buggy, that page. But in any case, once we're in the air, that is gonna look different anyway, so I'm rather happy with the way it is right now. Alright, then let's move on the flight plan and find our North Atlantic waypoints. Here they are. So we start in Dogal, and then we have 55 north, 20 degrees west. Thereafter we have 55 north and 30 degrees west. Then we continue via 52 north, 40 west. Then 49 north, 50 west. And the rest is database stuff again. Very good. So happy with that. And the ground distance 4309 and 4287 it is according to the flight plan. That one does probably not include the RNAV approach, so I'm happy with that. So last but not least, let's have a look at our chart and cross-check our SID to ensure that everything is correct down there as well. Alright, so we go straight ahead to Delta Lima 230, which is above 600 feet, whichever is later. Then right hand turn Delta Lima 239, our maximum speed 190 knots. That means we gotta keep the flaps extended at first. Then continue Delta Lima 248. And then from there towards Aircom, Delta Lima 245 above flight level 140, which we seem to be unable at the moment. And thereafter to Sonab. Alright, so far so good. Then let's quickly review the en route environment of the flight here as well. And that's looking pretty good. Finally, for the arrival, that seems just about fine as well. A little bit kinky here, we are gonna work that one out once we're in flight. Okay, so the only problem we have now is the Delta Lima 245 flight level 140 restriction, which we will probably not be able to comply with according to the plan. Let's see if we can do anything about that and remove the climb derate. So, give me full, yeah, flight level 160, that's fine. So we are going to keep the climb derate out so that we are able to comply with the altitude restriction at Delta Lima 245. Alright. So that's basically everything we had to do up there. So last but not least, let's set up the glare shield. QNH 1037, climbing 5000, and we want the constraints and the VORs on both sides. And the flight directors on both sides. Well, and that's basically it. Okay, very cool. So then, are you ready for the briefing? Yep, ready anytime. Okay, we are departing Düsseldorf, runway 23 left, Lima 1 via the Sonab 8 Tango departure, climbing 5000, MSA 2400, and we have a ton and a half of extra fuel, which gives us about 10 minutes. Sounds very good. No hotspots for the taxi. Stop margin in case of rejected takeoff is 132 meters. Engine outset straight at Düsseldorf X3, which is 25 miles straight at, climbing 3000. If we need to make an immediate return, we can come back to Düsseldorf. The runway is just about long enough, but otherwise, if we have anything that demands more runway, we can always go to Cologne, which is only 20 miles from here and has 3,800 meters runway available. I did prepare the ILS approach 23 left in the secondary plan though. In terms of special operations, we've got the 190 knot restriction over at Delta Lima 235, so if we check the performance page we can see that for that we can just about retract the flaps into the 1 position, but we gotta keep that. I'm happy with those 5 knots down here. Okay, so that's it. And last but not least, 55 meters of takeoff shift. I forgot those earlier on. And that's the briefing completed. Do you have threats? Nope. Wonderful. Me neither. Okay, perfect. Then let's read the NUT HLA guideline, please. So, pre-flight. Aircraft acceptance, ETOPS, pre-departure service check. Checked. RVSM equipment. Checked. Clock and GPS mode. checked. HF radios, checked. Message log, erased. ADSC armed. ATC auto position report, checked off. IRS full alignment, performed. Ground speed, checked 0. Not HLA, waypoints on OFB versus primary flight plan. Cross-checked, wind data, entered, and that's the guideline complete down to oceanic entry. Okay. So, pre-flight... No, it's actually called cockpit preparation checklist these days. So, cockpit preparation checklist, please. Gear bits and covers removed. Fuel quantity. 66,960 kilos. Balanced. Seatbelts on, ADRs. Nav, baro reference, QNH 1037. Cockpit preparation checklist complete. New weather comes out in 3 minutes, so let's see what that's gonna look like. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to say good morning to our passengers. Liebe Gäste, einen wunderschönen guten Morgen aus dem Cockpit. Hier spricht Ihr Kapitän. Mein Name ist Emanuel. Im Namen der Airberlin darf ich Sie ganz herzlich an Bord unseres Fluges nach Puerto Plata begrüßen. Flugzeit heute 10 Stunden und 10 Minuten. Wir werden einige Starkwindfelder durchfliegen, wodurch wir vereinzelt Turbulenzen erwarten. Wir bitten Sie daher, auch wenn die Anschnallzeichen ausgeschaltet sind, die Anschnallgurte angelegt zu halten, wenn Sie sich in Ihrem Sitz befinden. Wir erwarten heute ein wunderschönes Flugwetter, gute Aussichten und wünschen Ihnen jetzt einen schönen Aufenthalt bei uns an Bord. Bevor wir uns auf den Weg machen können, werden wir das Flugzeug noch enteisen müssen. Das wird einige Minuten in Anspruch nehmen und danach können wir dann mit unserem Triebwerksstart beginnen und zuerst in Richtung Norden abfliegen, danach dann über Amsterdam, Manchester, Nordirland und dann auf den Atlantik über Neufundland in Richtung Süden über die Bermudas direkt nach Puerto Plata. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit, lehnen Sie sich zurück und genießen Sie den Flug mit uns. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning from the flight deck. This is your captain speaking. My name is Emanuel. In the name of Airberlin, welcome aboard our flight to Puerto Plata. Today's flight time is calculated at 10 hours and 10 minutes. We expect some occasional turbulence as we are going to cross a few jet streams along our way. So please keep your seatbelts fastened, even if the fasten seatbelt sign is switched off. Today's routing is going to initially lead us to the north and then via Amsterdam, Manchester and Northern Ireland onto the Atlantic Ocean, Newfoundland and the Bermudas directly towards Puerto Plata. We do expect some excellent views outside the aircraft as we make our way to the Dominican Republic, but for the time being, we first of all have to de-ice the aircraft before we can commence our engine start. Thank you very much for your attention. Once again, welcome aboard. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight with us. Okay, our passengers are informed. The door is shut. Then I suppose we can remove the ground power units. Remove them in here. And, well, then I suppose we can go ahead and run the airframe de-icing and anti-icing procedure, please. And while we do that, let's tell GSX to prepare the position for pushback and departure. And yes, we want de-icing to remove any residual frost that might have built up during the night. Okay, so airframe de-icing and anti-icing procedure on ground. Communication with ground crew is established. De-icing and anti-icing fluid types are going to be type 1 at 50%. That's all we need, just a single step. Do not start the engines during fluid spraying. Okay, cabin pressurization mode selector. Check auto, and that is auto. Engine 1 bleed off. Air, engine 1 bleed off. Engine 2 bleed off. Air, engine 2 bleed off. APU bleed off. Air, APU bleed off. Ditching push button on. Confirm. Ditching push button confirmed. And on. Okay, check that the outflow valve, pack valves and avionic ventilation inlet extract valves close. And that is unfortunately bugged over here in the A330. Those just remain unaffected, but we'll assume that that has happened. So thrust levers check idle, and they're in idle, and that's the aircraft prepared for spraying. So let's assume that we'll have the Iceman on VHF 2. So, Düsseldorf Iceman from Airberlin Alpha Lima Papa Charlie. I go ahead. So, we are prepared for spraying and we'll just need a single step. Fluid type 1, 50% is sufficient for us. Okay, thanks. Prepared for spraying already. And fluid type 1 we'll use Kill Thrust ABC Plus and we'll start the de-icing procedure now. Please stand by. Roger. And here they come. Starting the spraying operation. Now, funnily enough, even though we have selected a fluid type 1, this one gives us some green-ish tone over there. And green actually is fluid type 4. So, little GSX bug in the logic over there. At least the good thing is that there is no active precipitation or anything, so all we're doing here is to remove any of the residual ice that might have built up during the night. And therefore it's only a single step procedure. Alright, so once they are finished with the fluid spraying, then we can run the rest of our procedures. But for the time being, we can already do the load sheet, please. So what do we have? Zero fuel weight is 151.8 and the CG 25.4. So 151.8 / 25.4. 67 is correct, and that's 218.3. And in here we have 218.7. The difference is the taxi fuel, so that's fine. We calculated our takeoff data for 220, if I'm not mistaken. So let's just recalculate for 219. We can make it 218.5. Compute. I'm doing that on my physical iPad here, and we actually gain a degree of flex temperature. So now it's flaps 2 and 41 degrees, and the speed 44, 44, and 50. Alright, so that data is in here. Then we have a CG at 24.5. And if I run that on my physical EFB, on my real-world EFB, it gives me a trim of 5.3 units. Let's see down here. 5.3 units. Perfect. So that is accurate. So, /up 5.3. And here we go. Okay, perfect. So, looks like the de-icing, anti-icing procedure is finished. Airberlin Papa Charlie, Iceman. Yeah, go. Okay, de-icing, anti-icing is completed. We used Kill Thrust ABC Plus, which is type 1 today in 50%. The de-icing has been completed at time 0923, and the aircraft is clear of vehicles. Roger, that's all copied. Thank you very much, and we see you next time. Cheers. Okay, so let's continue with the procedure upon completion of the spraying operations. Pitos and statics checked by the ground crew. Ground equipment removed. De-icing, anti-icing report received. Ditching push button off. So that's confirmed. And ditching push button is off and very hard to reach. Okay, at least 1 minute after completion of spraying operations. We already have that. Engine 1 bleed on, so air, engine 1 bleed on. Engine 2 bleed on, that's air, engine 2 bleed on. At least 5 minutes after completion of spraying operation, APU bleed as required, so we are gonna wait with the APU. Now, funnily enough, GSX turns on the anti-ice. when it does its de-ice operation, so let's just get those back off again. Okay, quick check down here. The outflow valves are back open again. And we have another minute until we can run the APU bleed. That's fine for me. Let's go ahead and grab our pushback, please. And you can do pushback to facing west, please. Right, before start checklist. Park and brake. Set, takeoff speeds and thrust. V1 144, VR 144, V2 150, flex 41. Windows. Closed, beacon on, before start checklist complete. Ground fighter, go ahead. So clear to push and start, face west, park and brake is now released. Roger, starting the pushback, stand by for engines. Stand by. That looks funny over there. I guess we don't want to take a close look at that. But here we go. Off to paradise. Once we're clear of the red line, we can commence our engine start. Oh, a little laggy here. Okay, so time is 28. That means we can turn the APU bleed on. And then we are ready for engine start. Sequence will be 1, then 2. Engine 1, start. Little sloppy effect there of the engine running up. I gotta say that much. Sounds could have been a little bit nicer on the outside as well there. Well, that's fine. Pushback complete, set brakes please. Brake set, and we're starting engine 2. Clear 2. Okay, good stun 1, and engine 2 starts. So, how far are they on the outside? Still working on it, it seems. But that's fine. They're still working on the engine start as well. A little bit slow here, to be honest. The GE engines do start quite a bit quicker than what this one does. But I did already submit that kind of information to any builds, so they are working on it as far as I'm aware. So, tuck is removed and skidding along by the looks of it. That looks really strange. Okay, ground, we have 2 good engine starts. You're clear to disconnect. Show me the pin on the right, please, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. So, we don't need an engine anti-ice immediately after takeoff, even though probably soon after. Okay, there's the ramp agent holding a pin, and the clear signal is received. Wonderful. After start checklist, please. Anti-ice off. Ecom status checked. Pitch trim 24.5%. Rudder trim neutral. After start checklist complete. Clear left side. Clear right side. And she is running away. Perfect. Alright, brake released, let's go. So even at these weights, the aircraft should taxi forward on idle at a decent speed, so normally you don't need thrust at all. This one is creeping along a little bit too slow for my taste here. Let's add a bit of power. Yeah, this is more like what the real one would do on idle. Okay, brake check. Pressure 0. The taxi routing is fairly easy, but let me show you. We're standing down here, apron Charlie, we push back onto Yankee, and our taxi is going to be straight out Yankee, Papa 4, Mike, and that's going to be all the way to the holding point Lima 1. So, clear on both sides on the roads. So off to the right over here. Maximum 15 knots, since we are going across an apron at the moment. This turn, however, is rather shallow, so I can't be bothered going slightly faster than 10, which would be our normal limit during turns. Okay, approaching 15 knots. Once we are on 15, we'll go to idle thrust. Here we go. The real one would continue to accelerate, so we'd have to break it back down to 10, then let it accelerate again. But you always want to apply a little bit of strategic braking as well, so maybe I'd let it go to like 17 or 18 now, so that I only need a single brake application before going through the turn over here, because that one definitely needs a maximum of 10 knots. So probably you slow it down to like 7 knots going into the turn, and then use a little bit of strategic steering in order to keep the aircraft below 10 for the turn. So we'll slow it down a bit here, just under 10. 8 is good. And then off to the right. I gotta say I'm rather thankful I don't have to maneuver the A380 over here. Which on the other end side means that as soon as NK Studios are going to release their Düsseldorf scenery, which is hopefully going to be a little bit more true to life than the Just Sim scenery we are using at the moment, by then we definitely gotta fly the A380 into here. Alright. So, speed is just above 10, that's, yeah, kind of fine for me. Let's do the flight control track. Full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral. And the rudder is moving, but since we don't have a tiller disconnect button, I don't want to overdo it with the rudder at the moment. Okay, I have no changes to the takeoff briefing. Do you have anything? No? Wonderful. And the cabin is also ready. Perfect. Taxi checklist. Flight controls checked. Flap setting. Conf 2, radar and predictive wind shear on and auto, engine start selector, norm, ECA memo, takeoff, no blue, taxi checklist complete. Alright, wonderful. So far so good. So just keep it in mind, normally here in Düsseldorf, my former company, as well as many of the resources online, have a different engine out procedure than what my present company has. All of those other resources go straight out to 6 DME Düsseldorf, then a right turn to Lima NDB and hold. That keeps you inside German territory. My new company doesn't do that. They just say, yeah, we don't care the country border. We go straight out 25 miles to ease the procedure, no matter what. After all, if you lose an engine, you will at least declare an urgency, normally an emergency. So it doesn't matter if you overfly the country border. Both are gonna work. Both are different takes for the same thing, but we are going to follow the procedure of my company here, which in case of an engine out is straight at 25 miles, climbing 3000, and then we can come back as needed. Okay, let's slow it back down to 10, and then we go into the turn. Alright, runway 23 left, cleared for takeoff. Cabin crew, prepare for departure.
Approaching 23 left.
That's intentionally. Lineup checklist. Takeoff runway 23 left, Lima 1. TKS, TARA, PAX 1 and 2, off. Lineup checklist complete. And we're clear on the approach. And we are clear on the left. So, 7 knots going into the turn. We'll probably need a little bit of thrust to keep the aircraft moving through the turn, but let's give it a go. A little bit of thrust on the outboard number 2 engine. Gotta love those long overshoots here.
On runway 23 left.
Checked. Alright, we'll do standing takeoff. Are you ready? Yes. Takeoff. Now, let's see how the INI is going to perform according to the real-life figures. Manflex 41, SOS runway, auto thrust blue. Thrust set, checked. .100 knots, checked. Rotate. Positive climb. Gear up. Nav. Checked. So far, so good. Awesome look outside, isn't it? Thrust climb, climb, auto thrust. Engine anti-ice on. And engine anti-ice is on. Okay, flaps 1. Speed checked. Flaps 1. Flap 0. Speed checked. Flaps 0. So, climb flight level 130, please. Getting out of the clouds, engine anti-ice off. Engine anti-ice off. Wonderful. We're above the clouds. Awesome view of the sky. What else could you ask for? So just about 10 hours to go, and then we'll be over in paradise with a really exciting approach waiting for us with the ANAF Zulu approach runway 08 over there. Autopilot 1. From here on it's going to be a long straight line, so set standard. Standard cross-check, passing flight level 43 now. Checked. Now that's an awesome view, isn't it? I just really love the looks of the A330. Such a cool aircraft. Such a cool aircraft indeed. And look at that, without the climb D rate we actually get a fairly good rate of climb here, 2,700 feet a minute. Now let's see though, passing 245 at level 164, that's like 2,500 feet above the restriction already, so I tell you what, let's reinsert the climb D rate. Thrust declimb 1, and it's running down over here. And we're now getting flight level 146 over Delta Lima 245, which is just about perfect. So contrary to how we did things in the Boeing, where basically once you deleted the climb D rate, it was out, on the Airbus we do things a little bit different. Because, well, basically different philosophies. And look at that, inserting that D rate has actually cost us 700 feet a minute. Now, why do we do things a bit different on the Airbus? That's basically because the Airbus continuously monitors the temperatures in the engines, and when it detects that the temperatures are lower, then it adjusts the maintenance requirements live on the go. And that's the reason why we would reduce that rate of climb and go back to climb 1 as soon as we know that we can make our constraint. So even if you depart with full thrust in order to be able to make that restriction, if you reinsert the D rate later on, once the restriction is made, you're still achieving something. You're still saving money with that. Alright, passing 10,000 and we can release our guests. I'll keep the constraints up over here until we are past the Delta Lima 245 point, so that we can see live how that's developing, and if we need to remove the D rate again. In the meantime, clear and copy. Well, cruise level 360, optimum 357, maximum 376. That looks pretty good to me. So let's climb to flight level 240. And while we're doing that, we can already go ahead and start to program a couple of our ETOPS waypoints so that that stuff is out of our way. So let's give it a go. We do need the SimBrief dispatch down here, please. And here's the ETOPS section. So, new waypoint. Entry number 1, and that is going to be at north 5501.5 and west 2038.3. Alright, store that one. New waypoint, that's going to be ETP1, and that's at 5001.0 and 03346.1. Then we have ETP2, which is at 4006.3 and 5927.9. And then last but not least, we've got the exit point, which is at 38387 and 06011.8. Alright, store that. Flight plan, fixed info, entry 1, ETP1, ETP2, and exit 1. And that's it. Wonderful. So with that, our setup is done. We're above 140 at Delta Lima 245. So now let's fly direct to Ravlo, which is the border to the UK. Here we go, Ravlo, direct insert. And then the last important question, estimated time of arrival, 1956. Scheduled time of arrival, 1950. Well, we'll probably be able to make good a little bit of that, so I am rather happy with it. No need to fly any faster or anything. I think it's gonna be just about fine. Well then, let's climb to flight level 360 as our first cruising level. And then I see you all again a little bit later as we start our arrival preparation and later on the approach into Puerto Plata. I hope you enjoyed the past 9.5 hours cruising over the North Atlantic, but for now it's time to start preparing for our approach into Puerto Plata. So let's go ahead and first of all leave that GoPro perspective right here and start to have a look at the latest weather conditions at our destination airport. So last update over here gives us 0906, SCADA 2226 degrees, QNH 1017. Now that means we are indeed going to fly the Arnav Zulu approach into runway 08, which is a really scenic one. So first things first, before we can go ahead and commence the approach, let's go ahead and do a little bit of planning here. Now, I did try to reach my Lido charts. Unfortunately, once again, the thing seems entirely broken, so we'll have to go with the Navigraph charts over here instead. Let's give it a few moments to load up that plugin. And here we go. So, import flights from Simbrief, Düsseldorf to Puerto Plata. It's really funny how we always depart with Lido charts, but then when it comes to our arrivals, we're always stuck with the good old reliable Navigraph charts. Okay, so that's all of our charts pinned then, so let's start having a look into the arrival. So on the ground we planned the Pocac 3 Sierra, but looks like the Pocac 2 Sierra is more suited for the ANAF arrival. So let's go ahead and reprogram that for a bit. So for the approach arrivals, we're going to stay on the ANAF Zulu runway 08, but we're going to take the Pocac 2 Sierra arrival with the EMIVO transition, and that's probably a little bit more realistic there in terms of what we can expect. So let's go ahead and have a look in the plan mode to see what it looks like now and whether that's any better than what we had previously. So coming in from Pocac above 9,000, max 250 knots, we proceed towards waypoint 371, again above 9,000, maximum 220 knots, waypoint 314, to 10 knots above 7,000 feet, then let's reduce that range a bit here. Here we go, and then towards EMIVO, and that's maximum 210 and above 4,000 feet. For some strange reason, those seem to be missing, so let's just insert them manually. 210 and plus 4,000. Alright. So from there we change onto the ANAF Zulu runway 08 chart, starting out at EMIVO, and then down towards Papa Sierra 351, 4,000 feet, and then towards Keslo, which is the final descent point. Now, this is where things are gonna get interesting. So, as we briefed on the ground, we do have the OEB for incorrect profiles during non-precision approaches. And that OEB basically leaves us two options. It basically says that under certain circumstances, you may not have accurate guidance from the final approach mode. And there's two different procedures. Either your operator has established a list of affected non-precision approaches that is updated with each navigation database cycle, or your operator has not done that. Now in our case, the operator has done that. We have such a list available. And looking on that, indeed, this particular approach, the RMP Zulu, here in Puerto Plata, is listed on that list. That means final approach mode is not going to be available. So we'll have to fly the approach in selected modes, aka we're going to use nav for the lateral tracking and FPA for the vertical tracking. Now, if the operator has not established such a list, the OEB tells us to check if the procedure in the FMS contains both 2 or more FPAs displayed between the descent point and the missed approach point, and an at or above altitude constraint coded at the final approach fix. Now, if we have a look over here, we can see Keslo is our final descent point. And there is only a single FPA coded in the FMS between the final descent point and the runway or the missed approach point. Now, if both of these are contained in the procedure, that's a single FPA and an above altitude restriction coded at the final approach fix, then do not use vertical managed guidance, aka final approach mode, do not use the LNAV and VNAV minimum, and disregard the VDAV symbol on the PFD. And that's the OEB 30 of the Airbus A330. In other words, we can't use final approach mode, we have to fly it in NAV and FPA mode. So in order to do that, we have to prepare a couple of things. So we are going to start down here. The approach is calculated as 129 knots today. So we're going to go to Keslo and we'll make 129 a hard speed restriction so that the aircraft slows down in time for us to be at Caslow, level flight, and at the final approach speed, so that we don't have to change our airspeed on the final approach any longer. Next up, I will help myself a little. I will make 4,000 feet fixed as altitude constraint as waypoint 351 over here, so that after this we immediately descend to 3,000 and then we can easily start the descent in level flight at Caslow. Alright, so that much about the OEB. We'll talk about the procedure again a little bit later. For now, let's continue checking our missed approach guidance, and that's going to be via Papa 355, which is an overfly point, and we have that in here as well. Then a left-hand turn to waypoint 356, maximum 200 knots, and we do have that in here. And then we continue via waypoint 357 back towards Emivo, and we are climbing to 4,000 feet, which we have down here as well. Perfect. Then we don't need any nav aids since it's a complete on of arrival. Mike Delta Papa 08 goes in here. So 0.79, 285, well, let's make that 0.8 and 300. Alright, now let's enter the arrival weather. And that is going to be 09086, 26 degrees, 1017. Like that. Now, let's get the chart out once again. For the minimum, we only have a single minimum published here, 660, so we will take that. Now, be aware that since we have to use FPA mode on final and not final approach mode, you cannot use an LNAV and VNAV minimum. If you had different minima published, you would have to use the LNAV only minimum for an approach like this. Alright, so that's entered. Then let's see, if we go conf 3, yeah, no change. That's not realistic. Not realistic at all. Alright, so the go around data is entered, and let's just quickly check what the MSA is. In the go around sector, MSA, yeah, 4,600 over there, so we do engine out until 4,000. Acceleration at 4,000, because that's our missed approach altitude. Obviously, around the airport, the initial missed approach sector is 2,300 feet, but we are turning towards the mountains after that. Alright, this one tells me we arrive with slightly negative fuel, but we'll actually see about that. Overall, the weather over there in Puerto Plata is good enough that we could commit at any time, so that would give us like 49 minutes extra over there. So something you could do if you are committing to destination is alternate fuel 0. Come on, you gotta let me do that. 0.1? Yeah. And then 45 minutes final time. So that way, at 30, you'd have to declare emergency, since you'd be on low fuel. But that way, we get like 25 minutes extra time shown over here. And when the FMS tells us we are on final reserve fuel, we still have 15 minutes extra. So that way you get a very good reminder there. Alright, secondary flight plan, copy the active, and that's about it. Now we don't have a landing performance calculator down here, unfortunately, but I do have a real world landing performance calculator, which we can just about use. So we're landing runway 08, the wind is 090 at 6, temperature 26, QNH 1017, the runway is dry, anti-ice off. Let's see about the landing weight. So we're at 159 right now, burning 2,000 kilos, so make that 157.5 to be on the safe side here. And then we end up with config full, we approach 132. So that is a little bit higher than what we have down here. Now, if we recompute that for a config 3 landing, in the real world, we would get an approach speed of 135. So I tell you what, let's do conf 3 and just enter 135 manually down here. And that way we can get to do a conf 3 landing over here. Okay, so that's pretty much our FMS setup complete then. We do have like 500 meters stop margin. I just calculated that on my real world EFB, making life a little bit easier. So landing 08 with 500 meters margin, we end up somewhere over here. So we'll probably have to roll all the way to the end, then make a 180 over there, and then come back, taxi in via Bravo to the apron. We're parking in Alpha 7 today. So yeah, that's the general plan. No auto brake, since it is pretty hot, and in the real world Airberlin did not have a brake fan on many A330s. And then we are past Markor, so north reference true can come off. Well, and that's all the preparation we needed to do complete. So with that, let's go ahead with the approach briefing, please. Okay, Pushback to Sierra arrival, Arnav Zulu approach runway 08, and we have an MSA in the north up to 4,300. The minimum for the approach is 660. Field elevation is almost sea level, so it is a rather high minimum here. Now, in case of go-around, we fly via those Arnav waypoints, initial speed restriction 200 knots, which means we have to remain in config 1 for that initial speed restriction, climbing to 4,000 feet. Now, extra fuel and time, we are committed to land at destination, because we did use a little bit more fuel than we should have. But well, committed to land at destination, so we are good to go over here. Okay. So, thank you very much for that. Now, for our arrival itself, we are going to use FPA guidance, nav FPA, and once we are visual with the runway, we'll go flight directors off, the bird will already be on anyway, and then land raw data. Landing config 3, stop margin around 500 meters, we will use the reverses to the maximum extent, auto brake off, and we'll exit the runway via Bravo. No hotspots for the taxi in, however it is a rather sharp turn onto the gate, because we're coming in from up here. So taxi to the left and then into Alpha 7. That's a rather sharp turn. So just pay good attention that we have sufficient speed when making that one. Now, single engine taxi is an option and we will do that. So we're on a GE fitted aircraft. That means we need 3 minutes of cooldown time for the engines. Nonetheless, start the APU right in the after landing procedure so that the APU will be available by the time we need it. Special operations. Well, the nav FPA approach is a little bit of a special operation, so let's just talk about that for a second. How are we going to fly that? So, arriving at the intermediate fix, waypoint 351, I want to be in 4,000 feet, and we will have started the deceleration towards final approach speed by that time as well. We'll overfly Caslo, which is the FAV, 9.3 miles out in 3,000 feet, and we will be fully configured by the time we overfly Caslo. 1 mile prior Caslo, ensure that the bird is on and pre-select the FPA to -3 degrees. 0.3 miles prior Caslo, we'll pull the FPA and set the missed approach altitude, which is going to be 4,000. We do have distance to altitude tables available on the chart over here that we can use to cross-check our vertical profile. And the cloud base is 2,200 feet today, so I expect to get the runway inside, well, around about at 8 nautical miles, 7 to 8 miles. Okay. And that's the entire procedure. Do you see any threats for the arrival? Well, it is a non-precision approach, so QNH blunder error is certainly a possibility. Now, how are we going to mitigate against that? We have already pre-selected the QNH 1017 in here and in here as well. And to be honest, that's pretty much it. Any questions? No? Wonderful. So that's our briefing complete. Then I will say goodbye to our guests. Liebe Gäste aus dem Cockpit, noch einmal Ihr Kapitän. Wir werden in ca. 10 Minuten unseren Sinkflug Richtung Puerto Plata starten. Verbleibende Flugzeit jetzt noch etwa 40 Minuten. Das Wetter in Puerto Plata aktuell 26 Grad bei einer leichten Bewölkung. Wir erwarten einen spektakulären Ausblick während des Anfluges auf beiden Seiten des Flugzeuges. Möchten uns jetzt von Ihnen verabschieden, wünschen Ihnen einen wunderschönen Urlaub, einen schönen Start in die beste Zeit des Jahres und hoffen Sie bald wieder an Bord eines unserer Flugzeuge willkommen zu heißen. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit und damit möchten wir aus dem Cockpit uns jetzt von Ihnen verabschieden. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon again from the flight deck, your captain speaking. In about 10 minutes we will start our descent towards Puerto Plata, and the remaining flight time is approximately 40 minutes. The weather at the moment 26 degrees with some scattered clouds in the sky. We'd like to thank you very much for choosing Airberlin today. Hope you enjoyed your flight as much as we did, and we look forward to welcoming you again on board of a future service. Thank you very much for your attention, and we hope to see you all again soon. Okay, so that is done. Then there's one more thing for us to check, and that's the fuel quantity. So we have 7,000 kilos in the tanks right now, but it looks like it's once again bugging around with the fuel in the trim tank. So we had that bug earlier on our Air France flight to Cayenne already, and we basically know that this fuel quantity there is getting unusable. Let me just try to transfer it manually. So, trim tank, mode forward. Let's see if it's gonna do anything. Probably not, that is a bug that we know already, so I won't make a big fuss out of it, but we gotta consider those 2,400 kilos are missing in here. And if we look at the fuel prediction then, we can see that basically brings us into the final reserves. Now, since that is a known bug, since we know IndyBuilds is gonna fix it, we'll just be aware that we have that issue. In case of go-around, we might run into fuel troubles, so in case of a go-around, we'll just fly pattern and come straight back if a visual pattern is possible in the given conditions. Okay, just so that we've talked about that one. Right then, so that's all we needed to do up here. Then let's turn on the fasten seatbelt sign and, well, I'll just keep the trim tank nodes in forward, see if anything's gonna happen, and then I see you all later in the approach. We finally see the Dominican Republic coming into sight in front of us. Still a little bit cloudy up here. Probably even a bit more than what I would have expected with the scattered 2200 META that we received prior to our arrival preparation. But nonetheless, a very interesting camera angle, that's for sure. But we are getting here. Alright then, let's go ahead and start to prepare ourselves for the arrival. We can see our airport down here. We are about to turn onto the downwind at waypoint 314 up here. And we do have our deceleration slowly coming up as well. Now let's go down to 3000 all the way via the arrival. So for the time being, that's Alt 7000 magenta. And then we can quickly do our 10,000 foot checks, which I already did, but just for the sake of completeness on the video here. Lights on, signs on, constraints selected, no LS, and then we do have GPS primary with a high accuracy, and last but not least the engine start selector is in norm. We're already cleared down to an altitude, so we are on the local QNH. Before we start the approach, however, since we are based on QNH very much, let's quickly update the weather. So now we have 090 at 5, 25 degrees, QNH 1017. So that's 090 at 5, And 25 degrees now, 1017 remains unchanged. Perfect. So, with all of that out of the way, let's do the approach checklist, please. And that is gonna be barrel reference, QNH 1017, seatbelts on, minimums, barrel 660, auto brake off, engine start selector, norm, approach checklist complete. And just to keep you guys in the loop, I did fix the problem with the fuel in the trim tank. We have that in our main tanks now, and the way I did this, I simply went to the payload page, and up here it always updates the fuel quantities live, so I thought, well, if I just hit apply load, wouldn't it actually reload my fuel and then distribute it correctly? I tried that, it did that, perfect. And that was the problem solved. So that way we now have those 2,400 kilos of fuel actually available. Alright then. Well, that much for all the basics. Let's go ahead and start flying the approach. I will keep the autopilot engaged for a little bit, since it can simply fly more accurate than we can. But let's already go ahead and activate the approach phase a little bit earlier today, so that we can start to slow the aircraft down. Flaps 1. Speed checked. Flaps 1. Lovely view on the mountains down here. And overall, just a really lovely scenery, isn't it? Right, for the time though, let's go ahead and focus on the approach itself. 2.4 miles until we can leave 4,000, so speed coming back nicely. Flaps 2. Speed checked. Flaps 2. Okay, let's force it down a little, since we do want to be level prior to Caslow. So vertical speed. Gear down. And then 1,500 feet a minute, making sure we get down to be level prior Caslow. Flaps 3. Speed checked. Flaps 3. Let's actually use a little bit of speed brake here in order to actually lose that airspeed.
2,500.
Checked. Okay, bird on. Hold star. One mile prior Caslow. FPA -3 is pre-selected.
1,000.
Checked. Okay. 0.3 miles. FPA -3. Go around altitude 4,000 sat. So we're only waiting for the cabin now. Let's give them a quick ding, and here they are. Landing checklist, econ memo, landing no blue. Landing checklist complete. Alright, the field is in sight. Then, where's my Navigraph charts? Sometimes it's annoying how laggy the simulator is while it is loading some stuff in the EFB, but here we go. Okay, so we're now 8 miles from the runway. It should be 2,620. We're a little bit closer, so a little bit lower, that is fine. And then 7 miles in 2,300. are a little bit low at the moment. Why is the cabin not ready any longer? Here they go again. Okay, 7 miles, should be in 2,300, so we're like 100 low. Correcting that. And the runway is in sight, we can see the puppies over there. So with that... autopilot off. Auto thrust off. Flight directors off. Runway track is set. And now we are all visual. That's one of the things I love the most about flying in the Caribbean. Those lovely visual approaches. Okay. Straight on the puppy. Should resume its 3-degree glide. I tell you honestly, that bird down there is bugged. That's not indicating correctly. Look at that, we're doing 140 knots over the ground. That means 700 feet a minute should be a 3-degree glide. This is not showing us a 3-degree glide down there. On that case, bird off, it's not giving us any good information. Now that's a rather significant bug that I'll definitely have to report to any builds. Now look at that, couple of trees coming up in front of the puppy there. In general, that's some rather high trees on the final approach.
Approaching 08.
Checked.
Minimum.
Continue.
500.
Would be lovely if we could still see the puppies, huh? But looks like we are more or less straight on them still. Actually getting a little bit high now. That's better.
Too fast! Too fast!
No, we are
Unstable.
not.
Unstable.
200.
Not sure what Ras is thinking there. Ras, off.
100.
Those trees are a little bit large there.
20. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Spoilers, reverse green, decel. Okay, manual brakes. Looks like we won't even need to backtrack, but we can just catch the exit straight away. Alright, very nice. And then very slow speed into that exit since it doesn't look particularly large. And with that, welcome to the Caribbean. Unfortunately, Ras acted up a little bit. That approach was neither unstable nor were we too fast. And then we got ourselves a little bit destabilized, but still within parameters, when I went to turn off Ras so that it doesn't scream at us for the entire arrival. That was a little bit unfortunate. I'm surely going to report that one to the developers. But apart from that, it surely was a fun approach, and surely something that we will do again at some point soon. But for the time being, after landing checklist, rate and predictive wind shear off, after landing checklist complete. So let's get GSX. Gate 7, that is not too small. Nope, the chosen position is not too small for the aircraft. Okay, we're at 1 minute 47 now, since we reduced our thrust to idle, so no single engine taxi today. We'll keep both engines running, makes it a bit easier to turn onto the gate anyway. Okay, that's Alpha 7 coming up over here. Then let's make that left-hand turn. Adding a little bit of thrust on the outboard engine right now to ease the turn onto the gate. And back to idle. Okay, the marshal is inside over there. Even though this doesn't make sense, we are on the center line here. Yeah, come on, just tell me when to stop, my friend. No? That's better. Seems too far forward though. Alright, stop. So, 1 and 2. Cabin crew, all doors and park. And here we are. So, beacon off, seatbelts off. Oh, not you. And here we are. So, parking checklist please. Parking brake or chocks, brake set, engines off, fuel pumps off, parking checklist complete. And with that, my friends, welcome to Puerto Plata, welcome to the Dominican Republic, welcome to the Caribbean. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. Now, let's finish up our work over here. We have an even distribution of the fuel usage, 4.7 tons in the tanks. Is too much, but then again, that means we didn't waste any fuel. But what I do note here is that we took quite a bit longer than what was originally planned. We took 10 minutes 34 over here, versus the planned flight time, according to SimBrief, of 10 hours and 10. That explains why we used up all that extra fuel. Now, en route, the airplane did get a little bit slow for my taste here. Should have been around Mach 0.80, Mach 0.81-ish. At some point it got down to 7.7. That's probably the reason why we were a little bit slower. So that is something that I will submit to any builds to check out. But overall, here we are. We made it. And that's all that counts, isn't it? I do hope that you all enjoyed the flight as much as I did. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments underneath the video. Now, let's have a look at how I actually parked. Yeah, look at that. GSX brought us in a little bit too far. Come on, get me that proper camera. Here we are. Yeah, just a tiny bit too far. A330 would probably have been somewhere over here. A340, 300, so we should have parked on there. But anyway, we made it. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. Be sure to leave your like and comment underneath the video. And if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.